So like you said, I'm going to talk about caregiving. And I'm specifically going to tell you about my caregiving story and hopefully raise a little awareness about what it's like to be a military and veteran caregiver today. So before I was a caregiver, I was a wife, and I was a mother, and I was a professional. Prior to 2016, I had been working in my career as an environmental consultant here in Texas. And I loved it. I was living my best life. But in 2016, with those three little letters, ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, ice bucket challenge disease, and in the military and family, or military community, that's a service-connected disease. That is my husband, Tom. He served in the Air Force. He discharged from the Air Force in 1996, and 20 years after discharging, at the age of 47, he was diagnosed with ALS. By the end of the first year of ALS, his diagnosis, he was having problems walking, so he had to use a wheelchair. He was also having problems breathing, so he had to use non-invasive ventilation. By the end of year 2, he could no longer walk on his own, so he used a rollator or a wheelchair to ambulate exclusively. He also needed to use his breathing machine every night because his diaphragm was weakening because of the disease. In year 3, he needed help bathing, toileting, dressing, and eating. We started seeing the inside of a hospital more than I ever thought I wanted to do. And between years 3 and 4, Tom had pneumonia, and he was told you could go home on hospice and die, or you can trach and vent and have more time. He chose to trach and vent to give our family more time with him. But while he was in the operating room having a tracheostomy placed, I made a phone call to my boss, and I left a career that I loved because Tom was now going to need 24/7 care. In years 4 and 5 of the disease, it continued. We also did this during the COVID years. Tom was paralyzed on a trach and vent, had a feeding tube, and could no longer speak to us, so we used eye gaze technology. And by year 6, my husband of 32 years died from service-connected ALS. He was 53 years old. When my husband died, I was no longer his wife, but his widow. But what I figured out was I was also an advocate because I had been advocating for my husband for 6 years and for all the other Central Texas ALS veterans. But the cost of caregiving came at a price. My own personal mental, physical, and emotional health suffered. ALS shattered my world. My husband's death broke those remaining pieces. In the early 2010s, there was a study done by the RAND Corporation that identified there are 5.5 million primary unpaid caregivers providing care to our nation's heroes. We provide care to the visible wounds, the burns, the limb loss, limb salvage, pelvic floor injuries, diseases like ALS and MS. But we also provide care for the invisible wounds. The TBI, PTSD, severe depression, anxiety, suicidal ideations. Our caregivers are on duty 24/7 to support our veterans. As caregivers, we help with what's called activities of daily living. We help feed them, dress them, bathe them. We get them to the doctor's appointment at the VA. We help encourage their social interactions. But you know, primary caregiving is just not the spouse, it's our children. Caregiving is actually generational. And a Mathematica study showed that we have 2.3 million kid caregivers or hidden helpers helping their parents or their grandparents. What I want you to know, it was not all doom and gloom for 6 years. We made room for joy in our home. We checked off the bucket list my husband had put together, and he lived long enough to see our son graduate from high school. I hope that by bringing a little bit of awareness today, that you now see us. Because the good news is that caregiving, we all need help. And now that you see us, you can help do something and help us. Thank you.